Wednesday, 6:14 a.m. Cloud ceiling, 2,400 feet. Barometric pressure, falling. I have been reading weather my entire life. My grandfather taught me. He said the sky tells you everything it plans to do. Most people just don't know how to listen. That Wednesday morning, I stood on what remained of my property line and read the sky the way he taught me. Low ceiling. The kind that feels like a lid pressing down on the valley. Pressure dropping fast, faster than the forecast had suggested the night before. Wind shifting northeast. Never a good sign in this county. And the creek behind my property, Burrell Creek, already running 3 inches above its summer line despite no rain in 4 days. Groundwater pressure building from upstream. I had seen this combination before. I knew what it meant. I turned and looked at the empty space where my flood barrier had stood 48 hours earlier. 18 inches of reinforced earthwork. A berm I had designed myself, built over 3 weekends, placed at the precise hydraulic choke point where Burrell Creek's overflow historically entered the low-lying properties behind mine. Gone. The HOA had sent a crew with a Bobcat and had removed it in 4 hours while I was at work. Left a letter on my door. Unauthorized earth modification. Inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. Removed per HOA enforcement authority. I picked up my phone. Called my neighbor, Hector Ruiz. Hector, what does your yard look like this morning? Fine, why? Lock up anything in your garage you don't want wet. Move your cars to the top of your driveway. Marcus, it hasn't even rained. It's going to. A lot. And the berm is gone. Silence. How long do we have? I looked at the sky one more time. 6 hours, maybe less. I want to tell you that I called the HOA president next. I did. She didn't answer. So I did what I always do when the sky tells me something serious. I started writing it down. My name is Marcus Tidewell. I am 58 years old. I have a master's degree in watershed hydrology from Georgia Tech, and I spent 24 years working as a flood risk analyst for the Army Corps of Engineers. I have modeled flood behavior in 31 counties across 6 southeastern states. I have sat in front of county commissioners and explained, in plain language, why a particular piece of land will flood under particular conditions. I have been right every single time. I retired early, 2020, and moved to the house my grandfather left me in Caldwell Hollow, a small, unincorporated community in western North Carolina. The house sits on a gentle rise above Burrell Creek. The rise is important. My grandfather chose this land in 1961 specifically because of that rise. He had watched 2 floods in the valley below and understood, without any formal training, that elevation was the difference between a wet spring and a disaster. He was a self-taught man who understood water the way I understand it, with 3 academic degrees. The instinct and the science point to the same place. The HOA did not have either. Caldwell Hollow HOA was formed 8 years ago when a developer named Stonebridge Residential built 46 homes in the creek bottom below my property. Creek bottom. I want you to understand what that means topographically. The developer had graded and filled a natural floodplain, the low area that a creek uses for overflow storage during high water events, and built $700,000 to $850,000 homes on it. This is legal. It is also, in my professional opinion, the kind of decision that eventually introduces itself very loudly. The HOA was formed to manage common areas. Its president for the past 5 years was a woman named Darlene Kovacs, 51 years old, former event planner from Charlotte. She had moved to Caldwell Hollow for the mountain views and spent her presidency ensuring that those mountain views were aesthetically consistent across all 46 properties. She had strong opinions about mailbox post styles. She had strong opinions about the approved list of exterior paint colors. She had never, in 5 years, attended a single county flood preparedness meeting. I had attended every one, 3 years before the flood, after the first warning sign. The first time I tried to explain the flood risk to the Caldwell Hollow HOA was 3 years before any of this happened. I had noticed something in year 2 after the development was built. Burrell Creek's overflow behavior had changed. Before the development, the creek flooded naturally into the lower meadow. The same meadow the developer had graded and filled. That meadow had been acting as a natural detention basin, absorbing and holding overflow water, and releasing it slowly. With the meadow gone, replaced by 46 homes and streets and impervious surface, the overflow had to go somewhere else. It had started going toward the back lots of the HOA properties. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, but measurably. I had installed a simple gauge on my fence post and had been recording creek levels for 18 months. The data was clear. At any rainfall event above 2.4 inches in a 12-hour period, Burrell Creek was now producing overflow that tracked directly across the low-lying corridor between my property and the back row of HOA homes. I brought this to a board meeting. I brought printed charts, gauge readings, a topographic analysis I had prepared in 2 evenings using publicly available LiDAR data. I explained what the data showed. I explained what it meant. I recommended the HOA Commission a formal drainage study and consider installing a shared retention feature at the corridor. Darlene Kovach listened with the polite attention of someone who has already decided not to act. "Mr. Tidewell," she said when I finished, "our development was built to county flood code. The developer provided all required drainage certifications. With respect, the county code reflects conditions that existed before construction. The drainage certification modeled pre-development hydrology. What I'm showing you is post-development behavior. Our residents are not concerned about flooding." "They should be," I said. "Thank you for your presentation." I drove home. I thought about what my grandfather would have done. Then I went to the hardware store and started pricing earthwork materials. If the HOA wouldn't build a drainage solution, I would build what I could build on my own land. The berm took 3 weekends. I engineered it myself, placed at the natural overflow entry point, designed to redirect Burrell Creek's overflow back toward the creek's secondary channel rather than allowing it to sheet flow across the corridor into the back lots. It was not a beautiful structure. It was 18 inches of compacted earth, reinforced with drainage aggregate, topped with native grass seed. It worked. In the 2 rainfall events after I built it, both above the 2.4-inch threshold, the overflow was redirected. Successfully. I recorded both events in my field notebook, wrote up a 1-page summary and dropped it in Darlene Kovach's mailbox. She sent me an HOA courtesy notice 2 weeks later. "Unauthorized landscaping modification visible from community common area. Please bring into compliance with Section 4.2 Aesthetic Guidelines within 30 days. I kept the notice. Filed it in the folder I had started labeling Burrell Creek. 18 months of documented correspondence. Over the next 18 months, I received 6 HOA notices about the berm. I responded to every single one in writing. Each response included the same 3 attachments. 1. My 18 months of creek gauge data showing overflow behavior above the 2.4-inch threshold. 2. A 1-page hydraulic summary explaining the berm's function and the corridor risk it was mitigating. 3. A formal request that the HOA commission an independent drainage study before taking any enforcement action on a structure that was actively protecting adjacent properties. The HOA's attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch from a Asheville firm, responded to my 3rd letter with a paragraph I still have memorized. The HOA's position is that aesthetic compliance is a community standard applicable to all visible structures, regardless of the owner's stated functional rationale. The berm as constructed is inconsistent with the approved landscape guidelines for the Caldwell Hollow community, and its removal is required under the CC&Rs. Aesthetic compliance. A flood barrier. I called an attorney of my own, a woman named Sandra Pruitt, who specialized in property and environmental law. Sandra read the correspondence. "Marcus, they can probably enforce the removal under the CC&Rs if the berm is visible from common area. The question is what happens after they remove it." What do you mean? If you've documented that the berm was providing flood protection and they remove it and flooding occurs, their liability exposure is significant, especially since you've put them on written notice repeatedly. How significant? Depends on the damage. But if 46 $800,000 homes flood, and you can demonstrate you warned them in writing— She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Document everything, she said. Every letter, every response, every rainfall event, every gauge reading. If this ever goes to court, you want 18 months of paper that shows you tried. I already had it. I drove home and added Sandra's advice to the folder. The folder was getting heavy. 2 days before the flood, a Tuesday, I was at the county planning office reviewing LiDAR data for a consulting project when my phone buzzed. A motion alert from the trail camera I had installed on my fence line 6 months earlier. I opened the footage. A Bobcat skid steer had come through the back gate of my property. A gate I had not locked because I had not anticipated this, and was approaching the berm. 2 men in work clothes. An HOA landscaping contractor's truck parked on the access road. I called Darlene Kovacs. She answered this time. Darlene, there is a contractor on my property removing my berm without my authorization. The board voted last week, Marcus. The structure had to come down. That is my private property. You do not have access rights to my land. The berm is in the community visual corridor. It is on my property. Your contractor is trespassing. I am calling the sheriff. Marcus, please don't make this difficult. It's just a pile of dirt. I looked at my phone screen. The Bobcat was already cutting into the base of the berm. Darlene, I said, I need you to hear me very clearly. That berm is protecting the drainage corridor behind your community. If it comes down, and we get a significant rainfall event, the back lots of your development will flood. I have documented this for 18 months. I have told you this in 6 separate letters. I am telling you now on a recorded line. Our development is built to code, Marcus. Code doesn't care about recorded phone calls. Water does what water does. She hung up. I called the sheriff. By the time the deputy arrived, the berm was mostly gone. The deputy took my statement. He noted the trespass complaint. He told me the civil matter, the right to remove a structure on my property, would need to go through the courts. I photographed the empty space where the berm had been. I photographed the drainage corridor it had been protecting. I photographed the Burrell Creek gauge reading that afternoon. And then I drove home, sat down at my kitchen table, opened my weather app, and looked at the 48-hour forecast. 2.8 inches of rainfall, starting in approximately 36 hours. I opened my field notebook and wrote one line. Tuesday, berm removed, storm incoming, corridor unprotected. Then I called Sandra Pruitt. They took it down. A long pause. And the weather? 2.8 inches in the next 2 days. Marcus, document everything from this moment forward. Timestamps on everything. Photos. Gauge readings every hour if you can manage it. Already started, I said. Wednesday, 6:14 a.m. to 12:31 p.m. The storm arrives. I will walk you through this hour by hour. Because the hours matter. 6:14 a.m. I wake to falling pressure and a sky that has dropped overnight. Creek gauge, 4.1 inches above summer baseline. I photograph the gauge. I photograph the empty berm site. I call Hector Ruiz. 7:30 a.m. Rain begins. Light at first. The kind that makes people think the forecast was exaggerated. Creek gauge, 4.4 inches. I text Darlene Kovacs. Rain starting. Corridor unprotected. Please advise residents in back lots to monitor. No response. 8:15 a.m. Rain intensifies. Northeast wind confirms the system is tracking as I predicted. Creek gauge, 5.1 inches. I can see the water beginning to sheet across the corridor, the natural low point the berm had been redirecting. A thin silver sheet moving slowly toward the HOA's back fence line. I photograph it. I timestamp it. 9 a.m. I call Darlene again. She answers. It's raining, Marcus. I know. The corridor is sheeting. It hasn't reached the backlots yet, but it will if this continues another 90 minutes. You need to call your residents. Our drainage system. Your drainage system was not designed for this scenario. I have told you this repeatedly. Please call your residents. Silence. I'll look into it. 9:47 a.m. The sheet flow reaches the back fence line of the HOA development. I photograph the moment. I can see it happening from my elevated property. A thin moving ribbon of water pressing against the rear fence posts of 3 backlot homes. Slow. Steady. The way water always moves before it doesn't. 10:30 a.m. The first fence post goes. Not dramatically. It simply leans. The water is now entering the rear gardens of backlot properties. I photograph everything. I try Darlene one more time. Voicemail. 11:15 a.m. 3 inches of rainfall recorded in my gauge. Above the 2.4 threshold. The corridor is no longer sheeting. It is flowing. The rear gardens of 6 backlot homes are underwater. I can see homeowners in their yards. Too late for sandbags. Too late for barriers. Too late for most things. 11:52 a.m. A neighbor 3 streets over posts on the Caldwell Hollow Community Facebook group. Anyone else getting water in their backyard? Starting to come under the fence. 47 comments in 9 minutes. 12:31 p.m. I record the peak gauge reading. Burrell Creek, 7.8 inches above summer baseline. The overflow corridor is running at full channel velocity. 11 backlot properties have water at or above their rear door thresholds. I close my field notebook. I sit at my kitchen window and watch the valley below. I am dry. My property sits on the rise my grandfather chose in 1961. I am completely dry. And I am the least satisfied I have ever felt about being right. Wednesday afternoon, rain easing, damage becoming visible. While the rain was still falling, I made 4 calls. The first was to Sandra Pruitt. It happened, I said. She was quiet for a moment. How bad? 11 properties. Water at door thresholds on at least 4. Still raining. Are you documented? Hourly gauge readings since 6 a.m. Photographs at every stage. Time-stamped. 3 phone calls to the HOA president on the record. 1 text message with a timestamp. The trespass complaint from yesterday. The deputy filed that. Incident report number in my folder. Marcus, do not speak to anyone in that HOA today without me on the line. Not Darlene Kovach, not their attorney, not their landscaping contractor. No one. Understood. The second call was to the County Emergency Management Office. I reported the flooding, gave them the location, the number of properties affected, the creek gauge readings. The duty officer noted my background. Mr. Tidewell, are you the same Marcus Tidewell who submitted the public comment on the Stonebridge Development Drainage Plan 6 years ago? I am. A pause that said more than words. We'll have someone out there within the hour. The third call was to Hector Ruiz. His backyard had flooded, 6 inches at the back fence line. His shed was wet. His vegetable garden was destroyed. He had moved his cars. He was angry, but dry inside his house. Marcus, you told me. You called me at 6 this morning. I know. You told all of them for 18 months. I know, Hector. What happens now? Now we let the water recede, and then we let the record speak. The fourth call was to my daughter in Atlanta. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was dry. She said she was glad. I did not tell her how I felt sitting at my window, watching water fill the houses of people who had removed the thing I built to protect them. Some things you process later. Wednesday evening. Rain stopped. Damage assessment beginning. At 4:47 p.m., 2 hours after the rain stopped, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the window before I answered. Darlene Kovach. No clipboard this time. No HOA letterhead. No event planner composure. She was wearing the expression of a person who has just watched something she was warned about happen exactly the way she was warned it would happen. I opened the door. She stood on my porch with her hands clasped and said, "Marcus, can we talk?" My attorney has asked me not to speak with HOA representatives without her present. I'm not here as the HOA president. Then who are you here as? She looked at me. Someone who should have listened. I looked at her for a long moment. Darlene, I called you at 7:30 this morning. I called you at 9. I texted you at 7:30. I sent you 6 letters over 18 months. I presented to your board with gauge data and topographic analysis. I told you what would happen. I know. 11 families have water in their homes tonight. I know. I tried to prevent it. I know that too, she said. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. I thought about asking her to leave. I thought about what my grandfather would have done with a person standing on his porch who had just learned a hard lesson. "Come in," I said. "I'll make coffee." She came in. She sat at my kitchen table. I showed her my field notebook. Every entry, every gauge reading, every timestamp. She read it for 30 minutes without speaking. When she finished, she set it down and said, "What does this mean for the HOA?" "That is a question for your attorney," I said, "and mine." The weeks that followed, Sandra filed the civil action 4 weeks after the flood. The complaint named the Caldwell Hollow HOA, its board of directors, and its landscaping contractor. The causes of action were: 1. Trespass. The HOA contractor had entered my property and removed a structure without authorization or court order. 2. Negligence. The HOA had removed a flood mitigation structure after receiving 18 months of written warnings about its protective function, and flooding had occurred as a direct result. 3. Private nuisance. The removal of the berm had altered the natural drainage of my property to the detriment of neighboring land. Ironically, the very HOA properties whose flooding had resulted. The HOA's insurance carrier got involved within 2 weeks of Sandra's filing. I will tell you what I know about insurance carriers. They read documents very carefully, and what they read, in my 6 warning letters, in the time-stamped photographs, in the creek gauge log, in the trespass complaint, in the phone records, was a clear and documented chain of causation. The HOA had been warned, in writing, repeatedly, by a credentialed flood risk analyst. They had removed the protective structure anyway, and 11 families had sustained flood damage ranging from $40,000 to $190,000 per property. The carrier's attorneys called Sandra in week 3. They wanted to discuss settlement terms. The landscaping contractor, a small business named Ridgeline Property Services, had deeper problems. The trespass complaint had generated a sheriff's report. That report, combined with the timeline and the damages, had been reviewed by the county attorney. The county attorney determined there was sufficient basis for a criminal trespass charge. The owner of Ridgeline Property Services, a man named Tommy Greer, who had been in business for 11 years and had simply taken a job from the HOA without asking enough questions, cooperated immediately. He provided a sworn statement confirming that he had been directed by the HOA board to remove the berm, and had done so without verifying property access rights. Tommy Greer was a decent man who had made a serious mistake. His cooperation was noted. His charges were reduced to a civil matter. The HOA, whose written direction had put him in that position, had a harder time of it. 4 months after the flood. The settlement was reached 4 months after the flood. I am not going to give you the full dollar figures. Sandra's advice, and I think the right advice, but I will tell you the structure of what was agreed. First, the HOA paid damages to me for the trespass and removal of my berm. The value assigned was the replacement cost of the structure, plus the documented cost of my 18 months of monitoring work. Second, the HOA's insurer paid claims to the 11 flooded homeowners. Claims that would not have existed if the berm had been left standing. Third, And this was the part that mattered most to me. The HOA was required as a condition of settlement to commission a full independent drainage study of the Burrell Creek corridor. The study I had asked for 3 years earlier. The one Darlene Kovacs had politely declined. The hydrologist who conducted it, a former colleague of mine from the Army Corps days, a woman named Dr. Renata Phelps, produced a 140-page report. Her conclusions matched my 18 months of gauge data. Her recommendations included the installation of a permanent engineered retention feature at the corridor, essentially a professionally designed version of the berm I had built on 3 weekends with my own money. The HOA funded it. It was installed the following spring. It works. The spring after, my neighbor Hector Ruiz lost his vegetable garden in the flood. He had been growing tomatoes and squash and corn in that garden for 7 years. The flood took all of it. I felt responsible in a way I understood was not rational. I had not caused the flood. I had tried to prevent it. But the feeling was there anyway. The following April, when the new retention structure was finished and the ground had dried out, I went to Hector's house on a Saturday morning with 2 flats of tomato seedlings, a bag of compost, and 4 hours. We rebuilt his garden together. New beds, better drainage, raised slightly, only by 4 inches, but 4 inches matters. His wife Elena brought us lunch, rice and beans and cold water, and we ate it on their back porch and looked at the new planting. "You know what's strange," Hector said. "I didn't want to replant. After the flood, I thought, why put in the work again when it could just happen again?" And now? He looked at the seedlings in their new beds. At the retention structure visible 2 properties over. Engineered, permanent, real. "Now it won't happen again," he said. "No," I said, "it won't." He nodded. "I should have trusted you from the beginning." "You moved your car," I said. "That's enough." He laughed. We finished the garden. Now, looking back, water does not care about aesthetic guidelines. Water does not care about CC&Rs. Water does not care about approved landscape standards or community visual corridors, or the opinions of HOA presidents who have never attended a flood preparedness meeting. Water does one thing. It finds the lowest point available, and it fills it. My grandfather understood this without a degree. He chose a rise. He watched the valley. He bought the land that would stay dry. I understood it with 3 degrees and 24 years of professional modeling. And for 18 months I tried to give that understanding to people who did not want it. Not because I was right and they were wrong, but because 11 families were going to get wet if I didn't. Here is what I want you to take from this. If you live near water, near a creek, a drainage channel, a low-lying area, any topography that holds or moves water, do one thing this week. Look up your property's flood zone designation on the FEMA Flood Map service. It is free. It is public. It takes 5 minutes. If you are in a Zone AE or Zone A, you are in a high-risk flood area regardless of what your HOA's drainage certification says. Know your risk, because the water does not negotiate, and it does not wait for the meeting to adjourn. If this story meant something to you, if you have ever tried to warn someone and watched them choose not to listen, tell me your story in the comments below. Your state, your situation, what happened. I read every single one. Some become the next script. And next Friday, a retired property attorney in Louisiana who spent 30 years watching developers build in wetlands. And what happened when one of those developers built on land she quietly owned the mineral rights to. Subscribe. You will not want to miss that one. From the rise above Burrell Creek. From the field notebook. From my grandfather's land. Thank you for listening.